While humanity has all but conquered the planet, at least concerning land, there is a vast, untapped expanse of nothingness that seems to pretty much completely disinterest our species and even attempting to spread out into it. There are many reasons for this, and maybe it's because, at one time when you were a fresh spawn, a bull shark ran into your leg. Maybe it's the knowledge that the lower you go, eventually you're going to just basically be in pitch black water, and that's just going to be all that's around you. Or maybe it's because one of the worst creatures to ever exist on the planet is there, known as the anglerfish, which potentially could be right next to you if you were to somehow survive the pressure. And just merely being near this thing almost makes nuking the planet's oceans immediately worth it. Yes, it's safe to say that the anglerfish is humanity's #1 op and should be destroyed as soon as possible with all due force. Correct and morally justified hatred of this abomination aside, just barely though, the oceans are essentially a desert with just a ton of water on top of them, completely hostile to humanity, spawning storms, and being our #2 op since the drop when we figured out that we could just build boats to float and basically, we're not just adapted to dealing with any of the challenges that are in the ocean. Yet still, most of our societies exist around it. Billions, or at least the upper hundreds of millions, flock to the oceans or some form of water when it's warm to exist in an environment we are in no way adapted to deal with. But why do we feel this draw? What is it that pushes us to the water's edge, with some going completely psychotic exploring its depths? Remains to be seen, but it does bring us around to today's topic. In the events of cold skin, a man is abandoned at an island as a weather observer for a year. The lighthouse technician down the way has got a interesting arrangement on the island, and at night, creatures come up from the waters to launch attacks. But what are these things, and why are they attacking? Well, let's discuss that in today's episode. So guys, this is completely insane, so hear me out when I say this because I think you're actually going to like this. What if I told you that not only could I give you a free, legendary, and 2 strong epic heroes using my link only, but you could also win $5,000 for a Christmas shopping spree, a gaming console, or a smartphone? Well, you'd probably call me crazy, but I'm not crazy. You're crazy, Ghost of Napa. $5,000 shopping spree for Christmas, which arguably is already passed, but I mean, who doesn't want a Christmas shopping spree anyways? And if that's not enough, there will also be $100 Amazon gift cards and other game prizes. How is all this offered? Easy! Raid Shadow Legends. Yes, they supported this video, and they're celebrating Christmas in Teleria with a special minigame. Download Raid using my link in the description, scan the QR code, and head to xmas.raidrpg.com, enter your Raid ID, and play a game to win. If I were a new player, I would definitely jump in on this because, once again, $5,000 to shop with. That'd be amazing. This event takes place between December 5th and January 15th. Players will need to save Santa by shooting the boss with snowballs, and once completed, you can either win the aforementioned prizes or even in-game loot like legendary champions or skill tomes. These icy cold champions, if you do win them, make the perfect snowbound squad. Champions like Tormund the Cold, who increases your entire team's defense by 33%, which is great for a defense-based nuker, and an absolute classic, Sir Nicholas, who has a 50% chance to place a freeze debuff which cannot be resisted by enemies. Remember though, you only have 24 hours to play the event after downloading Raid, and you must use my link for it to be eligible. If you haven't started playing yet, what are you waiting for? Click the link in my description and scan the QR code to get insane bonuses available only via my link. Bonuses like a huge starter pack with Epic Champion Hugo. You'll get another starter pack after reaching level 15, which includes Epic Fane, and if you download directly from the store, you're not going to get any of this. So after using my link, use promo code MonkeyKing to get legendary champion Sun Wukong for free, only lasting until February 7th. Come find me under the name Roanoke and join my clan Croatoan. But before moving on, I want to thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed, then leaving a like would be awesome of you. Without you guys, none of this would have even been possible, so I do appreciate your support. Check out the Roanoke Tales channel for like cryptids and true crime stuff. It's basically an amalgamation of anything that I find interesting. And check out the Discord for movies that we watch that end up here. Links for both in the description. We kick off our story with a quote. Whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster. And if you gaze long enough into the abyss will gaze back into you. Friedrich Nietzsche, I believe, was on some real Sphinx nonsense from Mystery Men. As cold skin fades in, a boat is overhead with some orcas following. A man says, "We are never far from those we hate, therefore we are never really close to those we love." Also, coincidentally, become the ruler of your anger, or your anger will rule you. Cut your pizzas into circles, or your circles will become pizzas. See, I can do it as well. Truly an appalling fact, as he puts it. As the man keeps narrating, He set sail 67 days ago, September of 1914, before things really start to kick off. Crazy how they were all calling it World War I during the war and not knowing 2 and 3 were right around the corner. But don't worry, World War IV is going to be fought with rocks and sticks. Not realizing matches don't work well in the wind, the captain comes over and lights up his cigarette for him. Cigarette, of course, being long for Garrett. Looking through at the spotter, we are approaching Humansville, Missouri. Heading on to dry land, they approach the empty shores of the volcanic island, I'm guessing. This area appears to be very volcanically active. There are no birds here, and the weather observer is not there to greet them. Heading to his shack with the fortifications up, Ranger McFriendly here then puts his hat outside as the captain tells him to hold off on bringing the provisions in because this place looks pretty sketch. McFriendly tells him not to worry about it as he has already given him safe passage. The captain really isn't so sure about that. Up to this point, he's hardly seen anything reassuring. See, the captain knows what's up. McFriendly over here is just ready to do anything but go back home for some reason, and it will never really be explicitly told to us why this is the case. Also, I don't know if my audio sounds bad or anything. I recently moved, and apparently everybody with the crappiest mufflers known to man, like, I don't know, a couple of tin cans, and it sounds like farting in a jar or something, that's what's passing this apartment. So get your muffler game up, I guess. I don't know. Anyways, approaching the waterfall, he reminisces about the captain being a Chad. Heading up to the lighthouse, it has way more fortifications as someone is better prepared. Of course, a lighthouse is going to be a way better bunker for this time of engagement anyways, as we will come to find out. Breaking in, guess the door wasn't locked. The captain then heads upstairs as we meet a man named Gruner sleeping on the bed. Waking him up, he's a maritime lighthouse official. This dude doesn't answer him at all, as Gruner then mentions typhus. Well, I don't need to see side dong or backside, that here we are. The captain then squares up with the guy as he walks off. McFriendly accompanies them back to the boat as the captain goes to give him the handheld, not trusting the situation in the slightest. Also, I'm making an executive decision here. His name is Gunnar now. It's not my fault. This is just his name, and I just work here. So McFriendly has to be there for about 12 months, with his only companion on the island being that guy, which is a total bummer. Getting his cabin in order, he then sits down to read the news. Franz Ferdinand and his wife were murdered, which, as we all know, set off World War I. Classic. Look, I don't like to quote Rick and Morty too often, but the me seeks, he wrote me into it is literally World War I in a nutshell. The dangers of alliances, it seems. Checking through the books of typhus, he then sees all the illustrations there as he finds a picture of this guy's wife. Continuing to look through, well, someone apparently went on to be a furry artist, as there are pictures of frogs going full-on froggy style with a human, with the words of Darwin being said that they were actually wrong. With pictures of a creature being eaten by what appears to be an anglerfish and someone else with a monitor lizard. What is this? So maybe this person shouldn't have been left on this island alone for that long. Turning to the last page, there's a lighthouse with figures in the dark, and this makes him tired after witnessing such horrors as then he passes out. The next day, he then heads out to the water to observe the weather as he finds a bunch of rocks and shells have been lined up. Going to check them, he then sets up shop and just sort of watches the water rolling in as he takes his notes. Then for some horrific reason, he uses binoculars to look over at the lighthouse to see what Gunnar is doing. Look, if there's any advice I can give you as your lawyer in life, never casually look at what a dude is doing called Gunnar, because we all know he's just hanging dong at midday. That night, he then hears someone at his cabin door. Saying this isn't an appropriate initiation ritual, he then stops as he starts hearing these gurgling noises. A fish hand appears as then he just straight stomps it as the creature outside starts shrieking and trying to break in. That's right, on site with the bipedal anglerfish. Heading into the cellar to hide, he then looks through a crack as the creature responds in kind, looking through the crack, and he stabs whatever came to look in there through the eye. Looks like they bleed red, so iron-based blood utilizing oxygen, and this is very likely going to put this creature as an earth-based organism, but we will talk more about them when we see what these things actually look like. Tying off the trap door, he then stays down there for the night. The next day, he emerges at morning and then heads outside. Finding footprints all over, they lead directly back to the ocean. I want off this planet. Heading over to Gunnar's lighthouse, he then yells at him to let him inside as he's freaked out. Instead, the dude just straight up throws a bucket of waste at him. Brother, let me tell you how this would be on site as soon as I break into your crappy lighthouse. Gunnar then says he should have stayed on the boat as McFriendly starts fortifying the cabin as best he can because of his new friends arriving. He douses books outside with kerosene next to his easily ignitable like Tinder match cabin. Not a great plan. He then finds a force multiplier to use, and I'm going to embarrass myself. I think it's an infield. Looking outside, he then sees dozens of figures on the shore as they start making a bunch of Zora noises at him, lighting them up as they break in. You know, you never have enough ammo, do you? The snarling then stops as they are on the roof now. Breaking through the barricade, he then burns the kerosene outside as they keep running around. Predictably though, it backtracks into his crappy cabin, realizing that he can't put it out because his door is probably soaked with kerosene. He then grabs a blanket and vacates the premises to make a run for it. So I see that there were mountains in the background. Why not grab your crap and just leave the next day? Luckily for him, it rains, which then puts out the fire as he returns to the crap shack the next day. This place will not survive another attack that night, which means he needs to leave. He then wraps his hand from his wound as he realizes he needs to go to the lighthouse. Heading over, he then tracks Gunnar through his paces before following him down to where he goes and gets his water. Waiting for him, there's literally like a human anglerfish behind the waterfall. Getting into a fight with this blue thing, well, I call it a fight, it really wasn't much of anything but a scuffle. Gunnar then comes around and tells him not to shoot. Gunnar drops his force multiplier as a sign he knows what he is doing. They decide to make a trade as Gunnar says the blue thing is harmless. He then calls McFriendly friend. I see why it was maybe confusing why I was calling him McFriendly earlier. I guess I probably should have told you about this, but he gets let into the lighthouse. Gunnar then asks if he was bit as the sun starts setting and they make a break for home. So having seen this thing, let's discuss it for a moment, as when we will see Oliver later, in the most non-creepy way that I can say that sentence, it will support a lot of my thinking as to what this thing is and where it comes from. First and foremost, this is a bipedal animal. Now the thing to know about bipedalism is, at least true bipedalism, is it's pretty uncommon. Now, there was a time that I mentioned this before, but I forgot to qualify it by saying true bipedalism in mammals is uncommon. Rare, some would say. Actually, the reality is there's only one species of mammal that is truly bipedal, and it is man. I mean, I guess kangaroos kind of crawl. Anyways, now bipedalism in the animal kingdom is less rare. Birds, for instance, are bipedal, and specifically ostriches with their weird man legs, which makes them even stranger. Anyhow, given the body structure of this creature and the proportion of its body, we are left to wonder several things. First, why did this species even arise in the first place, and how was this accomplished? Well, it's really hard to tell, but I see two possibilities based on the weird book found earlier. From what I can see, clearly there is a human influence concerning body structure here, and towards the end, this is all but confirmed for several reasons. Now, was it a recent human intervention or a delineation? We can discuss that momentarily, but what I do see is unmistakably that this species stands upright on its two legs, and this would indicate the level of intelligence is likely higher as the spine now supports the skull, much like with our species, meaning that the brain can be larger. And take that with a grain of salt because it's not necessarily confirmed, but there does appear to be a causal relationship between body size and brain size. In this species, their brains are very likely about the size of ours, and their bodies are also similar in size. So if this hypothesis of brain to body size turns out to be correct, then this would mean this particular species is fairly intelligent. What's more interesting is, given their actual body size and the actual physical structures that they have, this indicates that they were land-dwelling not too long ago. If that sounds odd, then I would like to bring up one of the more strange examples of animals returning to the ocean. Whales were once wolf-like quadrupedal species that kind of roamed, obviously, land. At some point or another, they returned to the waters to likely hunt fish, as for one reason, it was just probably easier for them to do, and also land animals can tend to be aggressive. So as they entered the waters and swam, their traits would almost return back to what they used to be, and this would confine them to the oceans once more. Their legs would be lost, blubber would then build up on their bodies, and eventually their internal anatomy would adapt to living in like water rather than on land. According to the theory of evolution, animals emerged from the water onto land, just for whales to then go back. For humanity, for one reason or another, we witness evidence in other species concerning the changes that they have undergone in different environments, but for some reason when it comes to like Homo sapiens, we are much more hesitant about accepting that we are also a part of nature and subjected to potentially the same changes. But I think you guys kind of see where I'm going with this on my thought process, but for those that are just here for the ride, we will round back to that point momentarily. So later on, I think this whole movie is just the writer's thinly veiled fetish. Let's just get that out there right out of the gate. As McFriendly here wakes up with Nebula licking his hand, and I know a Marvel reference, that's pretty cringe, but I don't know what else to call this thing as it's undeniable the similarities are there. He then asks how long he's been out. Apparently it's been 2 days, and he also peed his pants. Well, considering that bucket you threw at him earlier, are you sure you didn't pee his pants? That was really stupid. Heading upstairs, Gunnar is counting the ammo as Nebula then puts rocks on it to prevent it from floating away, which Gunnar then laughs at. Brother, I mean, it's a good plan when you live in the ocean. Maybe you're stupid for not putting rocks on your things that you don't want floating away. Those who don't put rocks on their ammo risk their ammo becoming rocks. Got him! McFriendly then asks if Gunnar can speak with the beasts. He goes and then looks at the nebular fish as he wonders how they evolved independently and how they are stuck in an evolutionary stalemate. Well, I mean, they could be. I have another idea, but we'll kind of talk about that later. Actually, just kidding. We're going to talk about that now. There's an idea that has persisted for quite some time that humanity is actually the pinnacle of evolution. Like how when it came to other animals' evolutionary climb up their own kind of, I guess, tier you can call it, they were just further down the list than humanity was. Now, undeniably, this is a pro-human channel, and I suffer not the vegan teacher. And really, the only thing guiding my views on tiers of animals, though, is my own education. So while things have changed over time, really, I mean, early 1900s Roanoke probably would have thought the science at the time was sound as well. And in another 100 years, it'll probably change again. Anyways, as a former scientist myself, that's why you just don't trust science. You challenge science, and it's supposed to hold up to scrutiny time and time again. Nope, then it needs to be changed. Anyhow, so you can think of it this way. Every species as it evolved would reach an endpoint, which apparently was supposed to be humanity. Our line just did it quicker. I believe it was Darwin who actually challenged this idea with his Origin of Species. Evolution is very complex, and it's not like there's just a singular path of ascending hierarchies. Instead, it branches outward with equally complex animals adapted to their environments. Now, this idea came out in 1859 when the book was published and largely accepted by the time of his death in 1882. But that does not mean old habits don't die hard. McFriendly mentioning this shows this bias towards humanity being on top, which again, due to our cognitive abilities, I do believe we are the most intelligent and pretty much the caretakers of this planet, given that we can deep fry it as well in nuclear hellfire. But that does not necessarily mean something is more intelligent and couldn't evolve in the future, or that we will even always be here on this rock. Now, this particular species is not really stuck in an evolutionary stalemate. I believe there is something entirely different going on here, but we have to take into consideration, I suppose, best way to put it, what the book meant by Darwin was wrong. Does that mean animal evolution does not go the way we think it does, or does it mean that humanity really is the endpoint and this blue woman proves it? Well, time will tell. Back to the movie. So Gunnar says she doesn't leave as he taught her a lesson. I don't know, man. That thing is a little too human. Bit of an odd situation you got going on here. McFriendly then asks why Gunnar doesn't actually want to go back to civilization rather than just keep fighting these beasts. They discuss how someone will come by as Gunnar says he doesn't believe it. McFriendly then starts tripping over being stuck there with Gunnar, which I believe is a very acceptable feeling. Heading downstairs, he then finds a diver suit as the nebular fish then starts sniffing him and eating a candlestick. He tries to tell her that's not edible as Gunnar then tells McFriendly to get his force multiplier. Locking and loading Brides of Christ, then head out to the balcony as an attack begins. Nebular does some weird call thing as the creatures begin running up the walls. Falling back, he then leaves Gunnar to fight alone as he is overwhelmed by what he is witnessing. Instead, choosing to take a nap, he is then awoken the next morning as Gunnar says he is an island. Gunnar needs no one. Gunnar has drawings back in his cabin that he hopes McFriendly didn't see. Welcome to Gunnar Island, brother. So he tells McFriendly to go fetch some water as he hears rhythmic thumping upon his return. Heading upstairs, okay, well this is horrific. So sort of like that time you accidentally walked in on your parents, they all sit down to have an awkward meal as nobody says anything and avoids all eye contact. Angler woman then offers McFriendly a crab as Gunnar says, one last chance, getting up and going upstairs. Lock and loading Brides of Christ once more, the time of attack has commenced, with Angler singing once again. Gunnar says, hold, as then he backs up and locks McFriendly outside to fight alone like he did the night before. Again, as soon as I got back inside, it is on sight. I'm saving that last round for you, buddy boy. You have 11 months to cover up the disappearance of Gunnar once this task is done. Just say he got eaten or something, I don't know. So the next morning, Gunnar then heads outside to see what's left of McFriendly. Opening the door, axe to the head. Now, unfortunately not. McFriendly survived as a routine is then established. They fight every few days as the attacks get longer and longer. McFriendly is forced to take on menial tasks to keep the place going and to actually keep his spot at the lighthouse. Months pass with this arrangement as he now has a beard. They talk about how even cows get names, but Deep Sea Woman doesn't appear to have one. He then brings up maybe him holding her there is making the attacks commence simply because she is calling out to them. Gunnar replies with kill and conquer, it's what humans do. Technically correct. Heading outside, Gunnar then says they need more timber. McFriendly asks why they really haven't even been attacked in a few weeks, as Gunnar then asks if he likes staying in his lighthouse. Given all the interactions prior and what he keeps walking into concerning the rhythmic thumping, no thanks. Anyways, timber through the brainstem. Am I violent? No, I just wouldn't trust this dude as much as McFriendly does. He's shown several times he cannot be relied upon, and so, no thanks. So, heading back to the cabin, he then sees himself as he shapes up his beard, and I need to grow a beard like this. Walking down to the beach, he finds a whale vertebra. That night, he suggests maybe they migrate in the winter, or possibly they know they cannot win, so they've just stopped. As time passes, he then hangs out with Nebula and hears horrific events transpiring upstairs every few nights. Brother, leave the building. McFriendly doesn't understand how Gunnar can, take out these mermen, yet keep smashing the mer-woman, which is somewhat adjacent human, I suppose. Like, how is he not repelled by her cold skin, as McFriendly calls her Aneris, which is backwards for siren in Spanish. As he calls her this, Brother is about to engage in the forbidden fuss. My lawyer has suggested I not finish that joke. That night, McFriendly then talks about how Aneris must have some sort of antifreeze in her blood that prevents her from getting too cold, or at least freezing, like literally freezing. And that they also have two sets of membranes on their eyes, an outer one and then an inner one for diving. So let's discuss this because it's actually rather interesting. So as we all know, the depths of the ocean are extremely cold. At about 39 degrees Fahrenheit, while not entirely frozen, this is pretty close. And at those temperatures, humans can survive only around 30 minutes to about an hour and a half, given how much fat, if you have a lot of fat, you're going to survive longer. The reason these waters are so frigid is warmer water rises and colder water actually sinks. Any animal that traverses this water needs to contend with this issue. Not to mention there's also the problem of salt water being much colder than fresh water, or at least the point that it freezes. Salt prevents water from freezing at its standard temperature of 32 degrees Fahrenheit in the Lord's units, or 0 degrees Celsius in heathen units, while actually it's only 28.4 degrees or negative 2 degrees Celsius. Now this doesn't sound like much, but this would mean the water itself is liquid and below normal freezing point. So should an animal enter these waters, it's entirely possible their own fluids will actually start to freeze up. The problem mainly being their blood. The solution to this is IBPs, or ice binding proteins. When ice begins to form, it takes on a predictable structure. In order to survive frigid temperatures, animals whose bodies are adapted through an untold amount of those who didn't survive have these proteins bind to the actual ice that accumulates in their bodily fluids. This prevents the ice from growing and causing more issues or spreading. They can also appear to direct blood flow to specifically blood vessels that have been water cooled, allowing them to be rewarmed. This double membrane also supports the idea that this species very likely at one point existed on land, and we actually see this in land animals too. Like, you notice how fish really don't have double sets of eyelids? I mean, sharks definitely have a set of eyelids, but it's sort of just like a membrane eyelid. Anyways, so the animals on land, obviously this is known as the nictitating membrane, and this is a secondary lens that covers the eyes apart from the eyelids. There's evidence of this in humans, or the remainder of it, and is in the corner of our eyes. That little bump is what's left of the human nictitating membrane. Within the mer-woman, this would protect the eyes from debris in the water and allow them to see out of it. It may also focus the light better, allowing them to see under the water with more clarity. So back to the battle of the minds out here playing chess. Gunnar then puts McFriendly in check, as McFriendly then puts him in checkmate, as Gunnar starts having like a breakdown saying that's not possible. McFriendly is like, dude, just chill out. I mean, yes, I played Pot of Greed, which allowed me to draw 4 additional pawns, as then I end my turn playing Pot of Greed once more, as an attack commences on the lighthouse with hundreds showing up to attack. Coming from all directions, that just means you can defend in any direction, joy abound. Being forced to fall back to the lighthouse further and further, they then head up to where the actual light is, as the platform is completely swarmed. In their climbing, Gunnar gets his leg bitten, as then they lock the doors and Gunnar cries about it for a little while. The light then goes out as Gunnar starts singing until the next morning. Aneris starts going ham on the wound the next morning to stop the pain, which is rather interesting because typically in animals, we see this a lot like in mammals. It is well known, and it's known as wound licking, which would be imperative for this species to develop not only this trait to prevent sharks from finding them, but also as a way to kind of dull their pain. Licking wounds is actually an instinctive response and is also present in humans to a degree, but exists to prevent blood loss. Lysosomes are actually tissue promoters and exist within the saliva that will then go on to clot the blood, but also attack bacteria that may enter the area. While this does sound great, don't lick your wounds. Bacteria from the mouth can be equally as bad for an open wound. It's exceedingly likely that this developed in this species as a result of their need to quickly have wounds seal up in order to not become target. Anyhow, as McFriendly then heads down to the shore finding necklaces left behind, this kind of means these creatures think. Looking up, he then spots a boat in the distance as Gunnar asks where McFriendly is running to. Heading out there with a flare, Gunnar then stops him as he says, "Gunnar rules the world." Nebula then runs up growling at him as McFriendly then gets stopped once again. Gunnar says, "No more people," as McFriendly says he's too afraid to let his friends leave. Yeah, he's got some real problems. You also have the literal answer with you at all times. It's called lead. Hearing Gunnar go ham on Daenerys once more, he then follows her out to the whale bones as then he finds her there. Handing her a whale vertebrae that he carved, she then looks at it as she's bleeding from her nose. Again, you have lead. Use it. Showing her how the boat works, she then gets him to follow her as she runs off down the shore, leading him to a boat. See, these things can also connect what they are looking at. I think it's just a language barrier. McFriendly then goes back to Gunnar telling him that there's a rowboat out there, which apparently he knew about. Gunnar dismisses everything, saying it was a dynamite ship. The people that actually survived, or the smugglers, they came during the night and they got just pulled out into the ocean, so none of the plan is good. Gunnar dismisses McFriendly's plan of annihilating the creatures, then heading out to the rowboat anyways to get it seaworthy. He finds Nebula just sort of vibing out in what I can only assume is a hot spring, because otherwise that water would be frigid this time of year, and he does get in it. Stripping down, he approaches Daenerys, once again, thinly veiled. Gunnar then watches them from behind a rock as McFriendly is then awoken by Gunnar dropping a helmet on him. He has changed his mind. Rowing out to the boat, McFriendly then puts on the diving gear and begins collecting the dynamite. This is not an ideal time at all. Pumping air down to him, Gunnar then brings up the boxes one by one before McFriendly gets scared by a fish youngling. Falling backwards, he can't really get up because suits like this completely sucked back then, but arguably they still suck now compared to probably in another 100 years in the future, but you get the point. So pulling on the line to get air and also be pulled back up, Gunnar just sits there, not pumping any air down to him. So as soon as I get back on board, I'm stabbing somebody. Seeing the thing approach him, and then swims off as McFriendly realizes he's gonna die if he doesn't get out of there. Swimming up, Gunnar then pulls him up, knife to the temple. Getting back to the lighthouse, some of the dynamite is still good, and setting the traps, they then cover him up as McFriendly says the second line is too close to the lighthouse and it will damage it as it begins snowing outside. The austral summer is fading and now it's almost winter. Also, for those confused, austral is the southern hemisphere, so winter is taking place from June to September. That night, it's looking pretty chilly up there as they prepare, but no attack ever happens. The next morning, McFriendly gets up and then heads up top to find Gunnar is not in his bed. Going outside, he's literally reenacting The Shining next to the dynamite as he removes his hand from the plunger. I mean, he really could have just left him out there to freeze, but for some reason McFriendly is way too friendly. Getting him to come inside, he then removes the contacts on the plunger, as then they talk about how it's been 3 weeks and no attack has happened. Daenerys then shows back up with some starfish as Gunnar has a freak out saying they can't eat that. Technically you could, it's not going to be good though. Attacking the fish woman, McFriendly then turns on him as Gunnar now has a plan. Lure them inside and use the detonator to take them all out at once. McFriendly, it may be time to actually do something about this situation, but of course, he decides to just be friendly. As the fish woman then looks a bit distraught, that night McFriendly removes the barricade on the door and puts out some lanterns to kind of denote that the door is open. Heading upstairs, he waits for them to come in. Gunnar then heads upstairs to watch the waves as the sun begins to set. With it being officially night, Gunnar tells Nebula to sing, as then she starts singing, but I mean, he's pretty much gathered at this point that when she does sing, they do attack, and she doesn't really look too jazzed to be singing right now. It's pretty terrible. Once more, a bit of lead will solve this gooning problem. The lantern then goes out as McFriendly goes out there to be an accomplice of horrible things as he gets attacked before he is able to get the creature off of him. So the attack commences as hundreds run up the shore as it becomes a fight as McFriendly then ascends. Detonating the dynamite, the contacts are off of the detonator, so it doesn't do anything. Turning back into a regular fight, McFriendly then gets the contacts back on, setting off the first string as they were going to wait, but Gunnar then goes after the ones closest to the lighthouse, knocking them both out until morning. Waking back up, McFriendly goes to Gunnar and wakes him up next. Ah, damn, he's still alive. Heading down, they then look at the carnage as Gunnar goes around stabbing all of the wounded. McFriendly finds more evidence that this species is beyond just animal status by the necklaces that they are making. The next night, Daenerys continues wailing in the distance, clearly mourning for her species, which, why doesn't she just leave? Well, bit of a complex bit of psychology there, and this is a biology channel. This is how I see it though. Daenerys clearly is either indebted to Gunnar because apparently he saved her from some nets, or maybe she does actually like Gunnar. But the problem is, this has turned into a bit of a Stockholm syndrome, potentially, and she is just bonded with the dude due to their extracurricular activities, so it's not really an ideal situation. So it appears Males specifically are attempting to show up and pull her out of the area, but they are overwhelmed by man's defenses, as they do not really appear to have anything at their own disposal except maybe just their bare hands, which is interesting given that they create necklaces, but they don't think to sharpen a whale rib. That would have likely ended a lot of these issues earlier on. However, it's odd that Daenerys actually just keeps calling out to them, knowing that they're just getting absolutely slaughtered, yet still she stays. Gunnar then talks about how she will come back every time, as McFriendly is pretty sad about this because he's like, she's mourning. Then again, I mean, truth be told, Daenerys is not the only creature in history to stay in a situation that is clearly not a good one. Heading down to the beach the next day, he sees younglings in the water as then they swim off. So this time, he ends up building a symbol of peace, I guess, and then places the boat in the middle. Back in the lighthouse, Gunnar is emptying rounds in order to get the gunpowder and make more powerful countermeasures, as he puts it. McFriendly then heads up top and looks out, seeing nothing is around his ring of rocks. The next day, he finds Gunnar out cold, still like having drunk himself to sleep. Looking through the tarot cards, he then finds a picture of his wife with the same writing and a picture of him. Gunnar was Typhus, or at least the last weather guy who was stationed there. So why didn't he ever leave? McFriendly then wipes away how long he's been there, as then he heads down to the beach one more time, finding the boat that he had carved is gone. A youngling is in the distance, as then he drops his torch in the ring and squats down as then the youngling approaches. Looking out, he sees the fish woman coming up next. Interesting gill placement, actually. So I think it's about time we wrap up what this species is, given everything that we have talked about, and I believe it goes back in human history, not some random fish history. First, given what we see on her, these are actually mammals. Like, there's no shot it's not. They appear to gestate their young internally as well, because she has a belly button, meaning they reproduce viviparously, and they appear to have the structures, like mammary structures, which are going to allow her to produce milk for her young. Their stature, the shape of their knees, the heads, the face, the number of fingers, all this indicates that these are an offshoot of a former ancestor of humanity. There's a theory that floats around every once in a while that is actually known as the aquatic ape theory. This theory bases like kind of the structures that we have on the idea at one point humanity may have been somewhat aquatic when we had more hair because of the slight webbing in our hands and our ability to regulate our body temperatures better, our lack of hair creating a streamlined body. I mean, we were quite slender, allowing us to propel through the water pretty well. Basically, there are literally dozens of suggestions as to why for a time we entered the water and then adapted. Here's the thing though, while largely debunked, it's undeniable that we may see something happening today that could maybe help support this idea. The Bajau people in the Philippines, also known as the diving people, are those who are hunting the waters to this day and are considered to be aquatic nomads. Interestingly, over the centuries of doing this, they have evolved in a way that has adapted somewhat to a marine lifestyle. They evidently can hold their breath up to 5 minutes, indicating more than average red blood cells circulating within their circulatory system. Their spleens are 50% larger than other people's. They have developed a hypoxia tolerance that is medically relevant to their survival, and in some instances, it has been noted that the lenses of their eyes may actually be more easily controlled by the muscles holding it, allowing them to see better under the water by changing the actual shape of the lens. Their toes have become slightly webbed over time as well, and the soles of their feet have become thicker to allow them to walk on the sea floor. Along with this, the feet themselves have become more flat, allowing them to operate like a paddle to a degree, as well as their leg muscles are incredibly powerful, especially for the size that they have. So these clear adaptations in just a few centuries show that it is possible and it happens quicker than we might imagine. So again, while the aquatic ape theory is largely dismissed, we have to ask, is it based on reality or is it based on humanity's predisposition to sort of separate ourselves out from, I guess, natural forces? Hard to say, really. Probably it's more related to reality. Like, I don't think it's hard to really know what has happened in human history, but it's an interesting idea to think about. So what do I believe that these creatures are? I believe at some point in the distant past, humanity, when we were much hairier, likely around the Homo erectus era, not only did some just kind of break for Europe and Asia and become Neanderthals, while others stayed in Africa to become Homo sapiens, which caveat, there was a skull that was found, I believe, in Greece. That means humanity left way earlier from Africa than current models suggest, so that may need more refinement. But some erectus likely were on the coast and chose to enter the waters. If structures can form in just a few centuries in humans, then millions of years would yield massively different morphological characteristics in mer people. Gills form on the ribcage near the lungs, allowing them to exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide quickly. They can also emerge on land too and breathe the air like the lungfish, so at least for a time they would need to re-enter the water at some point, and this indicates some time was spent on land and others in the ocean. The structures that form, such as webbing, is clearly for the purpose of swimming, but the bipedalism is for the purpose of running on dry land, and it had already existed in the species prior to them entering the waters. So we also see at the end a fin emerges from the tibula and fibular area, allowing them to swim even better, being a wholly new structure which would have taken a while to form, necessitating the millions of years of time. This step between ocean and land is not something that would be too difficult to relate back to human, really. You would not have like these crossover structures if there was no relation between the two. Homo erectus, given its upright posture, is most likely the point at which this species would have split from Homo sapiens, and you can call them Homo aquatians or aquaticus, although that sounds like Greece, although it does make it sound ridiculous. So a shot then rings out as McFriendly says it's a truce that they want. He tells Gunnar that they were wrong, and then Gunnar's like, oh, Aneris, go inside. But she just sort of stands there instead of doing it, so he starts freaking out about how she's leaving him, though she's just standing there. Like, he starts saying this like a complete neckbeard, like nobody's leaving Gunnar. Oh god, he's talking in third person. So running back to the lighthouse, leaving nothing but his pride and a trail of urine, McFriendly then stays behind to communicate with the fish people. As Fishwoman then kind of heads out, Gunnar straight up like nails the youngling from like 100 yards away with this completely inaccurate thing that he created. I believe this is Aneris' offspring. This this guy desires the lead. Like right in the crotch and then in the head. McFriendly then runs back, engaging in a fight as Gunnar gets the upper hand for a moment as McFriendly calls him Aldo and then says, "You're no killer." Evidently doing this breaks him out of his psychosis, I'm guessing, as then he keeps repeating love over and over again. He then heads outside where the creatures gurgle and then he's torn apart for his transgressions. McFriendly then locks the door and stays inside, as they really don't appear to go after him. Although he has been assisting in this nonsense like the whole time, I'm really surprised they didn't just take out McFriendly as well. I mean, I get it. He was just fighting to survive, but likely they wouldn't care unless revenge is just something that doesn't exist within their species, which they're related to humanity. It's got to be in there somewhere. So assumedly, many months later, a man then comes in, waking up McFriendly as he calls him Gruner. Running through the same patterns as the original Gunnar, the man then says this place is a pigsty, as the other says he must have isolation sickness, and that's the only reason that he would be acting this way. I mean, he's probably been hooking up with a fish now for 8 months, so who knows? The ships have arrived to get him, as things, as we all know, ain't going so great in the rest of the world. So Aneris at this point is like, nah, and then nopes out of there, swimming away into the horrific depths, where most definitely God's most hated creature, the anglerfish, exists. And thus concludes Cold Skin. But anyhow, let me present you guys with a question. Where do you think the species came from? Let me know down in the comments. But with that, I want to thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed, then leaving a like would be great to you, as it helps get the video out there. And subscribing is baller, as in 2025, as mentioned, I'm trying to get to 1.25 million subs. I'll drop my Twitter, Discord, Patreon, Roanoke Tales, and Games links in the description. Speaking of patrons, I'd like to thank mine real quick. First, I'd like to thank our astronauts, Army the Better One, and Tristan Kessick. Thank you guys very much for the awesome support. Next, I'd like to thank our astrophysicist, Death Dancer, and Feather. Thank you guys as well. And to my scientists, Dakota 23, Invictus Echo, Metric System, Official Texan, and Dirk Hellstrom. I do appreciate y'all's support as well. And the rest of my patrons, you guys are awesome. It keeps everything running smoothly. Thank you. Without you, everything would be 1,000 times more difficult. So you're awesome. Anyways, so that's going to do it for me. I hope everyone enjoyed, and we'll see y'all in the next one.